There are a lot of aspects that make a show great. Well-developed characters, interesting editing, engaging dialogue to well-built stories, all of these aspects can make a show great. But no matter how much good there is in a show, there is almost always something to correct or improve upon. Poor pacing, bad or inaccurate writing, cringe acting, or even a bad soundtrack can make a TV show not as enjoyable. And when a show has one too many of these aspects, it can lead to a sad but appropriate decline in the approval of the show. But sometimes, even when a show has some of these issues, it is enjoyable. Occasionally you will get a show that will embody many good and bad aspects, but not only be enjoyable, but be loved. Everyone has that show. Everyone has a show that may not be quote unquote the best show, but it is a show that is dear to your heart. There are many shows I have that fit into this category, but there is one that holds a special place in my heart when it comes to it. It's the first one I ever realized this with, and it's one that always makes me smile. The Adventures of Merlin. The Adventures of Merlin is a BBC series that aired in 2008 when I was 7 years old, and I remember watching this show immediately when it came out. This show was amazing to 7-year-old me. How could it not be? The actors, the writing, the fight scenes, the music, the structure of the show, and special effects all came down upon me like a tidal wave. I hadn't seen anything like it before in live action. I had never watched a live action fantasy show until Merlin, and thank goodness for it. Each time a series would end, I would ask my dad when would it be back, and as soon as it did, I'd be glued to the couch watching the show with him. It became our thing. I have a lot of nostalgia for Merlin. It is a show I grew up watching with my dad. Of course I'm nostalgic for it, but even that nostalgia could not stop my analytical mind from seeing flaws of the show as I got older. But this did not matter to me because despite its flaws, I still enjoy the show for what it was. And as I got older and went on the internet, I discovered I was not alone. Tons of fans were scoured across the internet talking about Merlin and how good the show was. But why? Why do so many people care about this show? A show where people had mixed reviews upon the first viewing of it, and was eventually cancelled after 5 series. What about this show kept fans engaged enough to still to this day wanting a series 6? What makes this show so impactful and watchable? What is it about this show that is able to draw people in and keep them engageful? How did it get them to care? How did it get me to care as a viewer? There are many shows out there that are able to keep you engaged with their storytelling and structure. And while Merlin is able to do this, it also keeps you engaged with something else. Something gets you to care about Merlin. So today I want to talk about why The Adventures of Merlin is loved. For any series, it is important that the world you are experiencing is not only developed, but engageful. The world has to feel real for the theme you are setting it in. It should have a personality of its own, and be a character in its own right. The world needs to be alive. The Adventures of Merlin series is able to do this simply by letting you explore the world itself. Every episode of Merlin lets you learn of a new part in the world, the existence of a new creature, of traditions and religions, and more. The show is constantly educating you on the history and life of its world. One episode that does a great job at demonstrating this is The Poisoned Chalice. This is the 4th episode in the entire show, and it develops the world tremendously. In this episode, we meet a new kingdom, we see more of the classism that divides the servants and royalty, we meet new creatures, discover a new forest, and actually get to meet a new sorcerer other than Merlin. That is a lot to do in 45 minutes, and yet this episode balances it all wonderfully. You get to see how dangerous it is for Merlin to speak out against the king, and how little Uther actually cares about Merlin. The funny thing is that it's not personal either. Uther does not have a vendetta against Merlin, he just knows that his life is worth less than Arthur's. But we also see why Uther has become so bitter with sorcery with Nimue and the power she controls. The show never justifies what Uther has done in his quest for destroying all magic, but it does show you his point of view and logic behind it. I would say most people disagree with Uther's actions, but understand why he did it. That is a good character and world building for the show. The creators of the show spent a lot of time building up the culture for Camelot. In fact, I would say it never stops. It just slows down around season 4. Season 1 and 2 are heavily focused on two objectives. Season 1 is focused on getting you to like the characters, Merlin, Arthur, Gwen, etc. And season 2 and 3 are actually focused on getting you to like Camelot itself. First objective makes sense. If you want people to like your show, you need to like your characters. If Merlin, Arthur, Guinevere, or even Gaius were not likable, the show would not be nearly as engaging. Likeable characters are needed for your show to be enjoyed. This same philosophy applies to the world though. Like I said before, the world needs to be alive because your world is a character in itself. By the end of season 1, the show has introduced to us the main cast and has successfully gotten us enthralled with the characters. But how do we feel about Camelot? Well, by the end of season 1, Camelot feels interesting, but a little bland. There is a lot of potential around it, but it has not yet been explored. Season 2 focuses a lot more on Camelot's way of life. One thing that season 1 gives you the impression of is that Uther is a tyrant, and while he is a psychopath when it comes to magic, we also learn that he is actually a good ruler. A lot of people like Uther for his determination, compassion, and loyalty to his people. An episode in season 2 that does a good job in demonstrating more of the culture in Camelot is the Witchfinder. After Merlin gets bored and casts a spell that turns a smoke from a chimney into a horse, someone sees it, and to solve that issue, Uther summons the Witchfinder to find the sorcerer who caused it. We learn from the Witchfinder that because of the ban of all sorcery across Camelot, many people have made a living on just killing or capturing sorcerers. We also see that with Uther's propaganda, with what magic can do, the citizens of Camelot have become extremely fearful of anyone with magic.
I was drawing water from the well, sire, when I saw them. Faces. In the water, sire, terrible faces. Like people who were drowned. Screaming.
This episode helps explore different parts of Camelot by showing us what kind of people are living in it. Season 3 strengthens this grasp on people of Camelot. In the first 2 episodes, we see how people are reacting when they hear Uther is going mad, and we also get our first battle sequence in the show. By the end of season 3, when Morgana's taken over the city, it doesn't feel right. Not just because Morgana is a bloody psychopath, who is literally just murdering everybody, but also because you see the loyalty that the people have for Arthur and Uther. When Morgana is talking about taking over Camelot, she makes it seem like this is what the people want. But in retrospect, most people are happy with the way things were. It was only other sorcerers who did not like it. So when you get this shot of Camelot, you can tell it's not right, because it feels unnatural. It feels wrong to have this person as queen, because she does not care about Camelot or the people, but only about herself. The development of Camelot and the world overall does a great job in capturing you. The show lets you care. It lets you simply enjoy the series for what it is. The world building of the show is embraceful and natural. As the world progresses, you feel more and more. But the world building is just one aspect of the show that draws you in. The Adventures of Merlin has a personality through its editing, pacing, writing, and more. The editing in Merlin is some of my favorite in any show. Unlike shows like West Wing with long shots focused on characters or large scenic shots like in Game of Thrones, Merlin's editing focuses on helping express the mood of the show and to demonstrate moments that dialogue cannot. The show is always setting a mood through its editing and camera work. This can be shown with Merlin using his magic with quick zoom-ins, or the longer action sequences that we see Arthur use in later seasons. Each one of these scenes sets a mood for the show, while helping us experience what the characters are going through. When we see a camera stay focused on Arthur for long periods of time, it allows us to become more involved in the action. It also shows more effort. And as most shows should, the editing and shots of the show get better over time. The show grows out of its more childish humor and editing to more serious and grander shots of the world we are experiencing. As our characters get older and more experienced, so does the series, and it shows. From editing to pacing, the show leaps in quality and learns more and more as time goes on. The series feels like it is growing up, and that's because the show gives us a very specific personality. This is something I don't think is talked enough about TV shows or movies. When you are making a sort of media, the personality of this media has to be apparent. Star Trek: The Next Generation has a specific personality, one that likes adventure and stands up for what is right. It is always wanting to learn and to better itself. Good Will Hunting is a film that's personality is defined by identity and discovering who you are as a person. They each have a personality that defines them. So what is Merlin's personality? The Adventures of Merlin is a show with a personality of a child. A child that is learning what it is like to live your life, to make decisions on what kind of person you should be, but to never lose the wonder and imagination of your childhood. Merlin is a show that grows and learns as it progresses. As Arthur and Merlin become more and more ready for what awaits them, the show begins to tackle harder themes, more complicated messages, and begins to improve upon itself. While it does stumble across the way, the show tries to learn from its experiences. Seasons 1 through 3 are more of a child to teenager experiences. You're learning the world, the characters are still new, but by season 3, they are having to step up to the challenge. By season 4, they have grown up and taken their roles as leaders, and by season 5, they have thrived in their positions. Each aspect of this show has grown up and progressed in its role, but there's one aspect of this that I feel like takes it a step further than any other part in the show. Music is awesome in this show. I'm not gonna hide it because why would I? The show is a medieval setting adventure with dragons, wizards, kings, and more. It thrives off of the wonder and fantastical imagery that this world is giving. But there is more to it. The musical construct that the show gives us elevates normal or not as fascinating scenes to beautiful strings of music that tie everything together. Music in TV shows can be rough though, because the composers have less time than they normally do to make the music because they don't know what next week's episode is going to be until they've already written and sometimes already started filming. This can make it where you only have around a week or so to compose the music for an episode, which is not much time at all, but composers found a way to lighten this load a bit. In order to save time for composing and to keep the quality of their work, composers will make musical themes for the show. That way, whenever, let's say, Merlin does something silly this episode, you have a theme that plays whenever he does something silly, and that becomes a silly Merlin song or whatever.
Like that, is it?
You could have multiple themes for one character based on their actions. A theme for when Merlin is struggling, playing, or fighting. If you want more information on musical themes, then I would check out Sideways' channel. He has a lot of information on it. But this format allows for many things. One, it allows viewers to be able to recognize themes for characters as the show kept coming out each week, allowing the music to have a more powerful connotation with it. And two, it allowed for composers to reuse certain formats and to keep the quality of the work up. I actually like this format a lot because I like to search for themes while I'm watching a show and see how they work. So now that we know all that, what are some themes that the show Merlin uses? Well, there are a lot of them. In seasons 1 through 3, its TV format was much more episodic. Find out what adventure Merlin will go on this week on BBC. So this meant you would get your reoccurring themes. But then you get a new theme for the villain or a newcomer as well. Any major new event on the show would get its own theme usually. So when we look at themes, we have several base ones that repeat throughout the show. One of the more popular ones is Merlin Lost theme. I like this theme because it's simple. The theme focuses mainly on piano and flute that are mainly trying to express Merlin's frustration and his need for guidance. Another one is the Call of Destiny theme.
And so it will be for the young warlock arriving at the gates of Camelot. A boy that will in time father a legend.
It is one of the main themes of the show, and it usually pops up whenever a character is doing something that is really epic. It is almost like the call to action. This theme is played throughout the show from the beginning, but something neat begins to happen to it. As the show progressed, and we began to add more major characters, it began to reuse certain themes to evolve into new ones. A good example of this is Knights of the Round Table. This theme happens at the end of season 3 when Lancelot and the rest of the knights have been knighted. And well, let's listen to it. It's the Call to Destiny theme, but grander. It has more instruments, it has a choir, and it ends differently. While the others end in more permanent ways, this one ends with a more ominous ending. The Knights of the Round Table rallying at the Destiny's call. The destiny of the Arthurian legend is being fulfilled. It's a cool combination that I enjoy a lot. Another example that I like is the episode The Lady of the Lake, which had a theme for the girl named Freya. Freya, who becomes the Lady of the Lake, is hiding with Merlin and they begin to care for each other. There's this moment where Freya is scared and upset and Merlin is trying to show her how much he cares for her. As he is comforting her, we hear the Call to Destiny theme, but it's softer. It usually plays when the hero is doing something that's related to their destiny. But here, it plays when he's with Freya, and then it turns into Freya's theme.
You remembered?
Of course.
You made me feel that.
I don't want you to go.
It's a beautiful way to merge these two themes together because they represent two different things. On one side is Merlin's destiny, and the other is Freya and the life she offers. And while Merlin wants to be with her, he can't because his destiny lies somewhere else. I don't know if that's what it was meant to be, but that's how I interpreted it. It's a clashing of these two lives that can't coexist together. And even though themes can be used really well in this show, there are issues that can arise when planning is not done properly. Many times, themes have been inconsistent with their meanings, which can make things a little weird at times. Like in season 5, we hear Freya's theme playing for this kid that Merlin likes as he is dying.
Yes. Did I do something good?
Or we hear Guinevere and Arthur love theme play when anyone kisses. It's actually kind of funny. Well, maybe not every time. But these inconsistencies can be actually amusing and enjoyable, and knowing how rough television music can be, it still does a fantastic job with it. And with that, there are moments in the show where the composer creates an entirely new piece of music that only shows up once in the show, but that can make a lasting impact. I think the best example of this is the Fisher King episode. This piece is one of my favorites in the entire series. The music is some of the highest quality in the entire show, and it only shows up once when Merlin is talking to the Fisher King. I feel like this episode was one that the creators really enjoyed because it has a calm, fun energy to it while feeling epic, and I'm using epic to describe the fantasy and the Arthurian feel that the show gives. This episode is a classic quest, almost like a video game, and when you meet the end of your quest, there's a grand epic conclusion. And hey, the final boss gives you a treasure at the end. There you go. I've focused a lot on music in this show for a long time, so while there's one more theme I do want to talk about, we'll just have to wait. So far in this video, I've talked to you about a bunch of aspects in the show, about how it has great world building, showing a personality, and giving us a soundtrack that elevates it to higher ground. But there's one reason why, despite all its flaws, this show is still loved, and there's one aspect of this show that we haven't talked about yet that is the real reason why this show is loved, and that is the characters. So out of everything we've talked about, it all leads to the characters of this show. The world building helps our characters mature and grow into what they need to be. Personality of the show helps define who these characters are, and the soundtrack helps us understand who these characters are better than we ever could by ourselves. And it is the characters that have made this show last as long as it has. Whenever you look up Merlin on the internet, there are two major types of videos you will find. One is compilation videos of Merlin being sassy or Merlin and Arthur roasting each other. And two are going to be tribute videos from Merlin. Merlin is a show that is founded based off of characters and them trying to live their lives. While every episode has some threat they need to solve, the show isn't afraid of just letting characters exist sometimes. Watching Merlin just trying to study magic for fun, Arthur hunting, the knights drinking, or just chilling at a party, the show wants you to relate to these people, especially Merlin. He's the everyman. He is the one new to Camelot like us, and he is learning spells and magic along with us as well. Merlin is similar to Ahsoka from the Clone Wars. The two characters were new to the world they were entering. They had to learn and develop their powers over the course of a war, and in the end, couldn't save their best friend. He's a character that we grow along and learn with. Merlin's growth over the show is quite well thought of. From seasons 1 to 2, you really see the beginnings of him struggling to make the right decisions. You watch him learn spells and act and mature throughout the course of the show. By season 3, Merlin is at a point where he is able to do spells easier and recognize more of his power, and by season 4 and 5, he's full Master Chief with some of his abilities. I think an important aspect to Merlin's character is the fact that he fails, though. Merlin screws up a lot and he is punished for it constantly, especially in the earlier seasons. He's young, trying to learn magic, and under the king's nose. He makes stupid mistakes that almost or do get people killed, and the show never takes these moments away from you or him. It lets them sink in and lets you feel for Merlin and the mistakes he's made. Merlin's journey throughout the show is one that really embodies the hero's journey. In the beginning, he's much more naive than he should be, and by the end, he's much more cautious and wary of the world around him. This is a good and bad thing for his character. Merlin becomes so focused on Arthur's destiny to die and his fear of it that he stops being the lovable character that we're growing to know. There's a conversation between Merlin and Kilgara at the beginning of season 3, and it's this: "Your determination to see goodness in people will be your undoing." This line is a powerful one because it describes exactly what kind of person Merlin is. And even though Merlin never loses his sense of goodness, this phrase doesn't end up being true for him. Merlin in season 5 is so focused on stopping Arthur's death that he begins to lose his sense of kindness. The clearest example of this is with Mordred. Mordred in Season 5 is very similar to Anakin, and all Mordred needs to become a good guy is Merlin's support. But Merlin is so hell-bent on hating him that his hatred is what causes Mordred to become evil. Merlin should always be the moral compass for Arthur in the kingdom, and in the last season he falls a bit short on this. But even with this, Merlin is still able to show his compassion when we see him go to help the kid who lied about being a druid, or how he treats Finna still shows his loyalty to the people above all else. Merlin's character in the show represents more than just the main character, but a likable one, which is just as important. That's what this show does best. It has good fight scenes and special effects, but it's these moments here of him being himself or expressing himself that this show loves to do, because the writers of the show understand that if you don't like these characters, then you won't like the show. The show also uses a lot of symbolism through its characters, as well as especially with the Knights of the Round Table. Each of the knights represents an emotion or a trait that someone watching can cling to. Sir Leon represents loyalty, Sir Elian represents determination, Sir Gawain represents strength, Percival represents courage, and Lancelot represents bravery. Each knight has an aspect that demonstrates their personality. And the show doesn't just shove this down your throat, but it shows you it through their action. These guys don't just believe in Arthur, but respect, understand, look up, and even admire him. They see that he's a good man, a man who only wants to look after his people and to keep his kingdom safe from intruders. A man who has always struggled to do the right thing, who has walked a long way just to save his friends. And especially for people like Leon, who knew Arthur from the beginning of his younger years, you really get to see him grow for the respect out of him. It's his friend's devotion to him that keeps Arthur going in his time of need. He knows that he can't do this alone. He doesn't want to do it alone. But every time he believes that the burden of the world just falls upon his shoulders, the knights, Merlin, and Gwen are there for him to lean on. And while Merlin, Arthur, and the knights all provide steady foundations for the audience to lean on, these characters find foundations amongst other characters, such as Gwen and Gaius. These characters are the structures for our heroes. When Merlin is in a time of need or Arthur is confused and unsure of himself, it's these characters that take the reins and support them. And the show does a good job of showing this emotional support by taking it away. In Season 4, Gwen is enchanted to fall in love with Lancelot, or the shade version of him without knowing it. And because of this, she is banished from Camelot. For the next few episodes, Arthur has no emotional support. He is distracted and more easily angered. It gets to the point where Camelot gets vulnerable and eventually taken over because of this. The show decided to show us what happened without Arthur's emotional integrity, and it didn't end well. This bond that the characters have is integral to their personality and the way of thinking, and it shows that what this show is really about. This show is about friendship, a group of companions that live and die with each other, who make mistakes, they fall in love, and learn to laugh, but trust each other wholeheartedly. The friendships that are built throughout the show is what makes it as good as it is. It's what makes it endearing to watch, and this is where we get the characters that betray the foundation of friendship. The villains. The villains of Merlin aren't the best. They are all fairly straightforward in their motivations, which is usually, we don't like Uther, therefore we don't like you. Unlike shows like Avatar The Last Airbender, where the villains are explored in ways for us to sympathize with them, Merlin uses its villains to usually further the plot and to further our hero's emotional growth. They're not really characters most of the time, they're just there to be puppets and just MacGuffins sometimes. Characters like Morgause or Senryn have no characterization. We know nothing of Senryn, and all we really know about Morgause is that she loves Morgana and hates Uther. That's pretty much it. This lack of character growth can be frustrating when looking at the show because Morgause is a very big part of the show for a good portion of the time, and you don't know her. She's literally just an evil mustache twirling villain. So the show only has bad villains. No, there are 3 major villains throughout the show that are enjoyable, relatable, and somewhat believable. Nimue, Mordred, and Morgana. None of these villains are perfect, but each of them has at least one of these traits which makes up for them. Nimue carries the traits of relatable and believable. Of all the villains in the show, Nimue has the most character work done in the short amount of time that we have with her. Nimue's character is built off of this hatred of Uther. Not Arthur, but Uther. She only uses Arthur to manipulate Uther and is actually pretty chilling to watch. Nimue is the most believable villain in the show, by far. Her motivations make sense and you can actually empathize with her. Mordred embodies relatable. Seeing Mordred from the beginning and how his turn to the dark side happens is actually quite interesting and pretty close to Anakin Skywalker's. But the show puts more attention to him in Season 5 and lets us see him try to be good despite knowing Merlin hates him. In the end, he's just a kid, and I kind of like that. His turn to the dark side is pretty quick though, and his motivations with Arthur and Arthur just accepting him are very plot convenient. And finally, we have Morgana, who embodies enjoyable. More than any other character on this list, do I just love watching Morgana be the most evil person ever. From Season 3 and on, she is a riot with her constant evil smirking to her gliding behind trees. I just love it. She's such a comic book villain that it actually just makes me enjoy her more. The problem that lies with Morgana is that she goes from an empathetic person who cares about people around her to psycho killer and wanting the throne in just 1 year. This development is very fierce, and I would have liked to see some pushback to her hurting her friends, but that never arrives. She's totally down to killing Gwen as soon as she has a bad dream about her, and even before that, she's pretty much alright with that as well. So yeah, the villains of this show have a lot of problems to them, and I don't think any of the villains besides Nimue is actually a solid villain all the way through. I think all of them have a lot of flaws and aren't nearly as well developed as the heroes of the story by far. The heroes of the story just have a lot more time to be chill and to relax, and Morgana had that potential since she was a hero in the beginning, and we could have seen her become a very sympathetic villain by showing us where she's coming from. And it makes sense in the beginning where she's coming from, but it doesn't by the end. And now that we have talked about characters that we love, I want to talk about the one character I think embodies the show pretty much perfectly. From his character growth, from where he begins to where he ends, to his overall friendship with Merlin, it all cultivates to a very heartwarming yet tragic ending. And that's why we're going to be talking about Lancelot. The tale of Lancelot is iconic. Of all the characters from the Arthurian tales, Lancelot is probably the most recognized after Merlin and Arthur himself. He is the most noble of knights, the bravest, the fiercest, and most honorable. He is the one that would constantly give his life for the people he serves, the men he protects, and the woman he loves. The Lancelot we see in Season 1 of Merlin is young and untested, but eager to prove himself. He has little to lose since he has already lost everything, but what is his purpose? What is his goal as a man? Lancelot's entire goal throughout the show is to discover his purpose and to find out what kind of man he wants to be. When we first meet him, he believes he has already figured this out, to become a Knight of Camelot. He is so sure of this goal and desperate to achieve it that he breaks his ethical code to reach it, and the consequences of this action is not only the denial of the knighthood, but the loss of his home. Lancelot has spent his entire life trying to become a Knight of Camelot. Ever since his town was attacked and his family was killed, Lancelot has strived for this life as a brave and noble knight who not only protects those in need, but inspires as well. To be an example, since his childhood, Lancelot has had a purpose. So what do you do when this goal in life is crushed at a single command? You rise up to meet it. Lancelot, after breaking the knight's code and lying to his king and prince, has to do what he can to redeem himself. So he decides to ride out and help Arthur. And when the creature is slain, he is given another opportunity to reach his goal. The offer of being a knight is suddenly back on the table, but at the cost of his word again. He knows that he didn't kill the creature, but that Merlin did. And learning from his mistakes, he decides to not take the credit. And here we get the line that makes Lancelot different from anyone else in this show.
Forgive me, sire. I've come to bid you farewell.
What is this, Lancelot?
I lied to you both, and now there is conflict between you. And maybe one day fate shall grant me another chance to prove myself a worthy knight of Camelot.
But, Lancelot, you've already proved that to us.
But I must prove it to myself. Your Highness.
And after that moment, Lancelot leaves Camelot with the thought of never coming back. He leaves Camelot and his dreams behind because he knew he could never achieve them if he didn't stay true to who he was. This is what makes Lancelot unique, his understanding that actions and approval of others mean nothing if you don't have it for yourself. That a true knight must be able to look their king in the eye and give them their word. Lancelot is a man of honor. As the show continues, we don't see Lancelot again until season 2. And we see him at his lowest. After leaving Camelot, he decided to make a living the only way he knew how, with a sword in his hand. Lancelot doesn't believe that he will ever be worthy of the life that he wants, so he lowers himself to a place that he believes he is worthy of. He is fighting for entertainment, waiting for a lucky shot from a rookie sword fighter, for his life has no purpose now. That is, until he finds Guinevere. The sight of someone that he not only cares for, but sees as in danger, gives Lancelot a purpose again. Now, he can find a reason to fight other than to just survive. He can save Gwen from her chains and in the process die a noble death. A new purpose. And after breaking Gwen out of her cell, Lancelot wishes nothing more but to make sure that she escapes. After kissing him before she leaves, Lancelot stands his ground to defend the one person he has left to care about in the world. This moment is probably my favorite moment in all of season 2 of Merlin because of the emotional impact it has. Lancelot, a man believing there was nothing else to live for, stands his ground for a purpose that he believes in. And as we watch Guinevere run away, the love theme that they share turns into Lancelot's theme, ready for one more fight. It also has one of my favorite themes in the entire show. After Merlin, Arthur saved Lancelot and Gwen, Lancelot realizes that the feelings that Arthur has for Gwen, and realizes that the best path for Gwen would be for Arthur because he is a better man than he is. And the doubt that Lancelot has about his life comes back. This time though, it's a little different. When Lancelot leaves Gwen, Merlin, and Arthur, he leaves with a new ambition. Instead of living just getting by, he decides to go live a life that would make him a better person, that could help others. He doesn't live a life where he is just a soulless fighter, but someone actively trying to be a better person. And when we see Lancelot again after another year, he has grown, he is more confident, and knows who he is. He found allies like Percival in his travel, and has loyal friends like Merlin at his side. The crippling doubt that he had about himself, while it hasn't gone away, it's no longer overwhelming him. His anxieties, fears, and doubts have been transformed into an understanding and acceptance. And this is no clearer when he is sitting at the round table with Arthur and the rest. When Arthur's need is the greatest, he is asking his allies, no, his friends, to help him. And guess who stands up first? Arthur is the one who taught Lancelot to live by morals. Gwen is the one who gave those morals meaning, and Merlin is the one who supported him through it all. Each one of these characters has affected Lancelot in more ways than one, and now it was his time to help them. And after everything he goes through, Lancelot is given what he always wanted. Lancelot is given the knighthood he has so long dreamt of. The dream he thought had long passed away had finally unfolded. And with the thought that this would be his final day on this earth, Lancelot embraces the knighthood and fought for his prince. And then the impossible happened. They won. Against all odds, against everything pit against them, they won. The kingdom is saved. Morgana and Morgause have fled. And after it all, Lancelot is left with a question. What now? He has achieved his impossible goal. The kingdom he has so longed to protect is now his to protect as a knight. And we see him again in season 4. It's been a full year, and we can see that he is happy. He has continued to live his life as a knight, to serve, and we see that he has grown closer to his friends, particularly Merlin. In the beginning of season 4, it is very clear that Merlin and Lancelot have grown to become great friends. Above everything else, Lancelot is the one person that Merlin trusts with not only his secret, but his life. Throughout these 2 episodes, we see Lancelot, above everyone else, protect Merlin. And this is no clearer than when he learns that Merlin can't use his magic against the Draka. After this moment, Lancelot has made sure to stay by Merlin's side at all times, because he's the only one who knows how vulnerable Merlin really is now. When Merlin is hit by the Draka, Lancelot is the one who volunteers to take Merlin back. He will never die. It's here that Lancelot realizes that his greatest act to the world, his greatest act to the service of his people, to protect his men and the woman he loves, is to make sure that these 2 guys live no matter what. So when the moment comes and it's time for Lancelot to sacrifice himself, he doesn't do it because his life is worthless or because he has no purpose, but because he believes in something, or someone actually. He believes in Merlin. He believes in his friend. Lancelot's purpose was to be a loyal friend to the one person who never had a true one. So when he walks into death's arms, he greets it with a smile and embraces it. And we are left with this image of a man who started off not truly knowing who he was, to realizing that friendship and loyalty are not just codes to know, but to act upon and to live by. This is storytelling. Understanding characters and learning with them, growing with them as they understand the world around them, as they grow, learn, hate, love, accept, fight, struggle, and persevere through all of the struggles they will go through. They always find a way to stay true to themselves. There were rough patches, but through it all, everything came together to create something truly fun and unique. To create an interesting and well thought story that was actually pretty cool. Merlin doesn't reinvent the wheel. It doesn't try to teach us something deep meaning about destiny or stuff like that, but shows a simple story of friends uniting against enemies. While the coat of paint is different than most, it still has a base color that we all connect to. It has characters that we love and villains we hate. It has fight scenes that we connect to and effects that draw us in. But above all else, it told a story that needed to be told. It's a show that told a story in the way only it knew how. It told a story of friends and bullies fighting, uniting, and growing together. And that's why people still care about this show. It's because the characters are relatable and believable. It's because the story is unique and the show itself has a personality. The show is learning with you about these life lessons in a simple story. It wants to experience these things with you, and it wants to have fun with you. And that is why The Adventures of Merlin is loved.
Long live the king!
Long live the king!